Damn, how many people? Look at these niggas.
You got about 15 people.
Oh, and 2 of them is your girl and him.
3 of them are...
Travis motherfucking Scott, the greatest live performer on this planet.
He can vibe with every single person that's in the crowd.
Take care of these, right?
He was the first person to let me know that I wasn't alone.
He saved my life.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the LuckyDog Podcast. This is your host, Elias. This podcast is sponsored by EliasRushMedia.com. Today we are discussing Travis Scott's Look Mom, I Can Fly documentary on Netflix. Coming in at an hour and 24 minutes, here's a synopsis. Travis Scott, Look Mom, I Can Fly traces the Houston rapper's rise to superstardom, focusing on the months surrounding Astroworld. So me personally, as a music fan, as a Travis Scott fan, yeah, I like me some Travis Scott. I went and saw him when he was in Charlotte a couple months ago. I thought his performance was noteworthy. It was one of my favorite performances. I was not down in the crowds, whatnot, body surfing and popping and locking and whatever the hell these kids are doing these days. But I certainly had a good time from what I'd call was the nosebleeds. Even in the nosebleeds, people were getting hyped there. So I've been a fan of Travis Scott since I believe it was probably the one with the honestly, I guess I'm not a diehard fan if I can't remember all of this all of his work. Let me see. Travis Scott. I'm trying to figure out the mixtape that came out that I was really entranced by. But Days Before Rodeo, that was it. When Days Before Rodeo dropped, that was when I knew I was a fan of this guy. My college roommate, Hayden, actually had said, check this guy out. He's got this new sound. I think he's kind of coming from the good music, GOOD, the actual label that Kanye West had started back in the day. And I actually used to be a sort of a Kanye West fan back in the day, but since then that's kind of deteriorated. Much more of a Travis Scott guy now, and I like the sound that has actually transformed Travis Scott into the individual he is. He has a unique sound, and I think he absolutely knows that. When I went back and did an Astroworld review when the songs came out, I actually covered a lot of the stuff that I liked and didn't like about his music, and so I can label that podcast, link it down below for everyone. But overall, this documentary is his rise to stardom and the leading months before it. From a technical standpoint, this documentary is not very well made. I felt like kind of jarred and whiplash back and forth between scenes. Me personally, it was starting to feel like a collection of YouTube videos mashed in with some of his concert footage, which, I mean, granted, I've been to his concerts, I know how much fun they are, but if you aren't a Travis Scott fan, if you aren't even, if you don't listen to this guy, like, if you aren't aware of his music and stuff like that, I don't think this documentary is going to be changing your mind on anything. It does touch on some of his early personal family life, but nothing in a way that's like illuminating. I don't feel like the main problem with this documentary, when it comes down to it, is the essence of, we don't really get to see behind the scenes of Travis Scott. I mean, literally, we are seeing behind the scenes of him. We're seeing the production and pre-production of songs and how much work, time, and hard work it took to get some of these things made. And we see only a hand. It didn't feel really like he was struggling to make stardom, is what it felt like to me. I'm gonna start to, I guess, sort of touch into spoilers a little bit. There's not really spoilers for this, you know. It's a documentary, so if you think there's spoilers for it, it's the spoilers are whether he does or doesn't complete something, and so that's basically it. So the problem with this documentary is it feels like very much how I geared one of my first, I'd say, short documentaries I made for my college class. I'm not saying this is obviously much higher production than what I did for my college class. I shot mine all on iPhone. But what the problem was I made the documentary for more or less myself and my buddy that went with me. It was my buddy Benz. When we went to Colorado, I had gone with the intentions of shooting a lot more and shooting for the entire class to see this, for my entire college class to see it, and whoever else wanted to see my Colorado trip. But it ended up becoming much more of a collection of clips that were more pleasing for me as the director, as the producer to watch, than so much for the audience to watch. And so honestly, I was thinking about 45 minutes through, I was like, I think I've heard Travis's responses, damn, that's crazy, about, I don't know, half a dozen times. And I've seen every bit of that, in between that, somebody jumping off a stage into a crowd. And there is a lot of repetitiveness in this documentary, and what it comes down to is it feels like this is much more of a documentary you put on at while you're having a party or something like that. This is like a background watch. This isn't in a way that it's not quite like, it's honestly nothing like the Beyonce documentary. The Beyonce documentary is all about that one performance and how her culture was intertwined within the performance, and along with Black history. But this documentary, there's splits of performances throughout this documentary, but it's almost not even good enough that you can have in the background of parties too, because you might be able to have it in the background of parties, but it's not like you could just keep the sound on, because he will keep on starting and stopping the performances in between the scenes. And it's like, it doesn't really know what it wants to be, honestly, because there's just so many collections of scenes that are not on some sort of linear timeline. It doesn't really feel like we are going through how what it meant to come from, rags to riches kind of feeling. It's, for me personally, it was just jarring, and it was almost whiplash going back and forth from all these different time periods, and there not being some sort of solidified focus on it. There are some nice, heartfelt scenes that have to surround with his daughter Stormy. And the majority of those scenes were just in correlation to what Travis and his mother were doing. And the majority of that is, Travis is talking about, that he had been creating Astroworld, the album, since he was 6 years old. I really doubt that he was crafting Astroworld when he was 6 years old, but I can understand if he had the seed of the idea when he was at this theme park that he wanted a special place to go. And so once he was older and realized, the real Astroworld had been taken away, we're in spoilers now, the real Astroworld theme park had been taken away in Houston, that he wanted to create, his own Astroworld via the album. And so from that, through the end of the documentary, we find out he actually has the mayor opening up a new theme park called Astroworld. I'm assuming, and that is in his hometown, and so, or in Houston at least. So I was, I was happy for that, but ultimately it's like, opening a theme park, is that the ultimate goal for this? Because throughout the last, I don't know, 1/3 of the movie, he's kind of gearing up for the Grammys, and we actually get to see him lose the album of the year. I think it was to Cardi B, is who they said, and one of the most interesting scenes would have been to see his reaction. And to be honest, they just cut the camera right then and there. And I can understand you don't want to see, you don't want to post some of the most sensitive stuff, but I felt like some of the most interesting stuff that told us who Travis was would have been better served to show that, like, so that we see that he is going through shit. I mean, at the very beginning of the movie, he's of the documentary, he's arrested for possibly inciting a riot or something like that, and it's like, what? And it just kind of brushes by it so quickly that you don't really have a chance to kind of understand what's going on. And from the beginning of the movie, it felt like they were going to have some sort of linear timeline of, or if they weren't going to have a linear timeline of showing him growing up to getting older, why, flashing back and forth. Because one of the interesting things about this particular documentary is seeing the rags to riches kind of lifestyle. I mean, it shows where he was growing up as a young boy, and kind of walking around his mother's house, which is obviously looks like everyone else's middle class house, I would say. It's not too fancy or anything, but then all of a sudden it cuts wide, and when he's leaving his mother's house, you see that he's leaving in like a Lambo or something like that. Some of the extravagant parts of his lifestyle are kind of jarring in some parts, and it does seem that he wants to kind of show off some of his stuff, but the majority of the episode, I mean, you see what kind of house he's staying in, you see the type of productions he's putting on, and you also see who he's who his baby mama happens to be, actually, is what he calls her. What is it? Kylie Jenner, and we see a lot of many clips. Okay, so let's just say not many. Let's just say there's a handful of clips of Kylie Jenner and Travis Scott interacting, but nothing that tells us much about their relationship. Most of it is very physical on the face of it, kind of lovey-dovey kind of thing. But we don't see her explaining or talking. Most of it is all visual of them holding their daughter Stormy, which she's really sweet. And like all the scenes she has, I really liked their interaction, and it seems like Travis really likes being a father. I mean, he seems like he's going to be a pretty great dad. One thing I do want to comment on about the documentary is that it does show how much he loves the fans. And that was, even from the nosebleeds at the concert, I really did feel like, I almost felt like it was every other song he thanked the crowd for coming out, and I was like, wow, you know what? Not many artists go through that much trouble. Most of them are just performing the whole time. But he really did. I mean, he didn't stop the show, but I mean, he would thank everyone for coming out and how much it means to him. And I was, as a fan and just as someone, as a concert goer, it's like, oh yeah, thanks. It feels nice to be, I guess, observed, I guess. Yeah, I will say the documentary did make it look like there was a lot more ancillary riot kind of head bashing craziness going on at his concerts. And I will say that when I went, I'm mid 20s right now, and so when I went, I felt a tad out of place. I was with Kelly, and the average age, I would say, of the people there were probably around 18 or something like that. So I did start to feel a little bit out of place. I was like, oh God, am I the old guy here now? But I enjoyed myself, and I actually did see some older adults in there, in their 30s and 40s. But I was just surprised, the crowd that really goes for him is very much the almost is that Gen Z? Is that who that is? Because it's almost past millennials now. It's not even. I think millennials stop at like 22 now or 21. I'm not exactly sure. Getting old. That's all I gotta say. Yeah, I will say it was just a tad bit of a misfire when it came down to it. One thing I will. Yeah, I will say I think Travis Scott has great branding behind his persona as Travis Scott. I think his real name was Jack or something. Let me see. I'll find out his shit. But I thought let me see. Jaquise Berman Webster II. Okay, so yeah. And he's 28. Holy shit, he's 28. Yeah, I would be acting a fool too. But it also should this. I guess there's a couple things I want to talk about. I feel a little scatterbrained just as this documentary has me. There was no cohesive way to show this documentary. I guess they just couldn't have it all in one, timeline. When I was watching, I thought it was crazy. I was gonna have to go back and check, but then I realized by the end of it, I was like, we've been jumping all over the damn timeline. I'm all mixed up. This does show the creation of Cactus Jack, the production studio company I believe he founded, and hold on, let me get a little water. So. Sorry. The Travis Scott brand, I think, did phenomenally well with the album Astroworld. Some will point to the fact that he had a baby with Kylie Jenner by that point. But, I mean, branding's branding. I mean, Kanye West, give or take his personal views, I will say, he did probably a pretty good number for his brand by marrying a Kardashian, and likewise with Travis Scott having a baby with Kylie Jenner, and they have a pretty good relationship as of right now, to my understanding. I don't go by all the TMZ shit, but just from a branding standpoint and marketing, it helps both of their brands to say, two big brands merging together are going to share some of their entities or their, the people that like both of those brands. So I believe Astroworld specifically, I don't know if I'm just now looking on how good of branding it is. I guess I'm sort of comparing to other concerts I've been to, which aren't tons. I might say like a Wiz Khalifa concert. I never felt like Wiz Khalifa had a full-on album that has come into more of a theme slash genre almost. Astroworld felt like it took on, out of all of the music that Travis Scott actually produced, it very much felt like Astroworld was the one that took off into its own life and created something new. And it has people wearing all the Astroworld look and apparel. And, a lot of albums have all that type of stuff, look and apparel. But the fact is Astroworld as a concept is a lot easier. It's kind of this like circus themed, almost punk, circus Mad Max punk or something, or the Mad Max circus. I would just say that. That's what it kind of feels like. And you're or almost like a hippie Mad Max, if you want to say that, if that makes sense. Just where a place where everyone is accepted and kind of is able to have a release, and that's what it very much felt like, as opposed to his other mixtapes, the Days Before Rodeo, or I think is Birds in the Trap the other the second studio album he had before that. Yeah, Birds in the Trap. Yeah, I like the songs that are on there and everything, and the majority of people that are on there as well. All the I have some of my favorites like Kid Cudi and Kendrick Lamar and Bryson Tiller and Young Thug and stuff like that. All on Birds in the Trap, but I don't really feel like Birds in the Trap as the album really took into its own theme or life of its own, like Astroworld did. So yeah, honestly, I think it comes down to good branding when it comes down to his success. With this documentary, maybe have somebody else behind the camera helping with. I think it was White Trash Tyler is the director of this, and I'm just kind of like, White Trash Tyler, I think we just need a little bit more of a creative concept and not so much, or we need to storyboard this out just a tad bit more than just collecting all the clips and having these random titles on there. The titles were driving me up the wall. I was like, okay, so the titles are for the date. Okay, no, so the titles are for the location. No, the titles are for the name of the person and location. No, because the titles are supposed to have some sort of continuity where it's like it's always the date or it's always the name, and it was going from like dates to names to locations, and it was just became so confusing that I was just like, I don't know. The titles are just making it so much worse. So just end with the titles. Just get rid of the titles. Okay, so let's do a couple IMDb ratings. Let's see. Yeah, people are either scorching this or they are giving it praise. 6 out of 10. Not much of a documentary, but is very watchable. It's Gas Carpet. This is more of a behind the scenes of Astroworld with a bunch of live performances. It doesn't really tell us much we didn't know before, so don't expect that. However, if you like him, you'll find this very entertaining. I personally liked him, or I like the artist, and I like his music, and I was counting the minutes to when this was going to be over. Let me see. 1 out of 10 by Salma Marcani. Not really that interesting. I was expecting something more interesting after seeing all the publicity and the premiere. I'm not a big fan of Travis, so I thought after watching this documentary I would learn a bit more about him, or at least start to like him a bit more. But it was just a bunch of behind the scenes of Astroworld and footage of people screaming and throwing themselves off stage. It felt like this documentary was made to make him look like a hip-hop legend. Well, I mean, if he was behind the production, then I would, say that he probably wouldn't want to make himself look bad. But I do want to see some trials and tribulations personally. And it just felt like not winning the Grammy Album of the Year was the only real big stump he had to go over. And I don't know, just wanted a little bit more than that, I guess. 5 out of 10, Smurfy Murphy. Felt like a music video cut in and out for some kind of visual component, but it lasted for an hour and a half. I mean, this did have very much a music video vibe or feel, and excuse me, they were also using this kind of grainy clip back and forth of showing times in like 2012, 2013 but trying to make it look like it was an old school clip using this, different composite or some sort of effect. And I was like, this is getting a little excessive, and it's inconsistent, is what it felt like, because there was actual old footage of him with his mother, which was touching to see, but one, it didn't tell anything narratively, with the exception of that bike riding scene that he was persistent. But two, the film grain was honestly better than some of the film grain that they were putting on the effects of the 2014 video footage. Let's see. 9 out of 10, a behind the scenes life story by Happy Toms, a behind the scenes artistic film which follows Travis and Scott and shows quite a lot of behind the scenes of his tour, interaction with fans, his dedication, family, and life. While it's showing the behind the scenes of the tour, it takes time to switch clips of him being young and reflecting of things and places from his earlier life. As someone who has heard about him a little bit and has heard about his music a little bit, it gave me a great insight about his community of fans and the world he has created all around it. It was quite interesting to see his offstage character and values, which at the end of the day made me appreciate all the hard work which goes on behind the scenes to create his art. Overall, pretty good. This guy seemed to like it a lot more, or gal, I don't know who it is. But personally, I felt like we did not find out what made him tick. I honestly thought the one thing I walked away knowing about this is that this guy seems a lot more shy than what he comes on to be. I mean, he's all about doing this crazy rager stuff, but ultimately, I feel like he just kind of keeps his head down. He's a hard worker. He doesn't talk too much shit. It doesn't seem that. So some of these rappers can have really big egos, is what it feels like in some scenarios. And he seems to have a very grounded perspective for how successful he is. I mean, at the end, we do see some of the bloopers of, all of the cool, nice cars, jewels, gadgets, houses and stuff, things he can do now that he is that successful. But ultimately, it still seems like he's still the happy boy that we see in the old school footage. Here's 3 out of 10. This Ain't It by Mudvayne. I love hip hop, and admittedly, I'm not a huge Travis fan. I will always watch anything about hip hop. This documentary is basically following him around with flashback footage slotted in. A lot of the filming is grainy and poor audio. I assume it's meant to have that old school feel, but it's sort of annoying to watch so much grainy footage. When I watch a documentary on an artist, I want substance. I want insight into their music abilities into the documentary. You get lots of concert footage with people throwing themselves off stage. You get footage of him recording, but you don't get actual meaningful insight into Travis or his creative process. Very true. I'm sure teenage fans will love this documentary. I wanted to like it and admire it. Admire that Travis is extremely hard working and amazing to his fans, but that doesn't correlate into an interesting documentary for me. I think this nails how I feel perfectly, because I wanted creative insight to see what made him tick. I didn't want to know that he has been crafting Astroworld since 6 years old. You were not writing the lyrics of Astroworld when you were 6 years old. One of the biggest insights I felt like were one of the songs. It sounds like he used the ultrasound from his baby as the very beginning of the song, and I felt like, I felt like that was one of the most interesting things. I wanted to know way more about his lyric choice and beat selection, about why he was doing it, what it made you feel. So, thank you for listening to the LuckyDog podcast. Please check out all the other LuckyDog podcasts. podcasts, media, TV, movies, media. You can find all in your favorite podcast provider. If you're feeling inclined to donate, please donate. PayPal.me/LuckyDog What else have we got going on? I just reviewed Midsummer, and that shit was crazy. That's all I got to say. Email for comments, questions, concerns, luckydogpodcast@gmail.com. Twitter, luckydogpodcast. Facebook, the Facebook group is below. Twitch, check out the link below. And Instagram, luckydogpodcast. I think we couldn't do this without you. And for comments, questions, concerns, you can, like I said, email me anytime. Take it easy.
So be ready for this. Now, I'm about to ready